The tape was recorded 6 days before the murder. On it, a dying man confessed to every detail, including one fact the police had not discovered yet. By the end, you'll know why that impossible confession pointed toward a vanished government project, and why the tape may have predicted nothing at all. The story begins in 1998, when an estate cleaner entered the apartment of a recently deceased audio engineer. The man had lived alone. No family photographs. No awards. Nothing suggesting that his work had ever mattered. But inside a locked steel case were 7 reels of quarter-inch tape. 6 contained ordinary test recordings, footsteps, doors closing, fragments of conversation. The 7th was labeled with 3 words. Statement before event. The voice on that reel sounded weak and elderly. It gave no name. It described the abduction and murder of a young woman beside a rural highway in the autumn of 1974. The speaker described her coat, the damaged passenger door of the vehicle, and the shallow grave where her body would be placed. Then he said something impossible. This statement is being recorded on October 8. The woman disappeared on October 14. Her body was found 3 weeks later. You might assume the date was added afterward. That would be the simplest explanation. But the recording included a spoken radio bulletin about a dockworkers' strike, a bulletin preserved in a local broadcast log from October 8. If genuine, the man had confessed before the victim was even missing. And at the end of the reel, beneath the hiss, another voice could be heard whispering. Threshold Trial 17 complete. Threshold did not appear in any public index. There was no official program by that name, no budget line, and no surviving agency seal. Only scattered traces remained, invoices for recording equipment, travel claims from behavioral researchers, and references to a prospective testimony protocol. That phrase matters. During the Cold War, intelligence agencies funded real experiments involving hypnosis, sensory deprivation, drugs, sleep disruption, and coerced memory. The goal was not always to extract what a person knew. Sometimes it was to make that person believe something had already happened. Imagine being locked in a windowless room. You are shown photographs of a stranger. You repeat a statement hundreds of times. Each mistake is corrected. Each corrected version becomes more vivid. Eventually, you stop remembering the corrections. You remember the event. Except there was no event. One surviving invoice placed the audio engineer at an isolated research property during the week the tape was made. Another listed blank tapes, sedatives, and a replacement automobile door. That sounds like evidence of prediction. But look closer, and the story turns inside out. If the confession truly came first, then perhaps the tape did not foresee the murder. Perhaps it was the blueprint. Police arrested a local mechanic for the 1974 murder. His vehicle resembled the one described by witnesses, and fibers from the victim's coat were reportedly found in his workshop. He denied everything. After 20 hours of questioning, he confessed, then immediately recanted. He claimed investigators had supplied the details. The jury never heard about Threshold. It never heard that one interrogator had previously worked security at a behavioral research site. And it never heard about the recording dated 6 days before the crime. The mechanic died in prison. For decades, that looked like the end. Then the deathbed speaker said one sentence that changed the meaning of the entire case. I did not kill her. I prepared the memory of the man who would say he did. Suddenly, the tape was no longer a murderer's confession. It was a technician admitting that he had helped manufacture one. But before we get to what Threshold was actually testing, you need to understand something even stranger. The victim may not have been chosen randomly. The murdered woman had worked briefly as a typist for a defense contractor. Not a scientist. not an operative. She processed travel forms and equipment requests. But months before her death, she reportedly told a friend that she had copied documents, in case something happened. Those copies were never found. Her employment record was later reduced to a single payroll card. Several pages had been removed from the original police file. And the evidence inventory listed one object that does not appear in any surviving photograph. A small magnetic tape marked "Interview." Here is the contradiction. If officials wanted her silenced, constructing a false confession would create unnecessary risk. A staged accident would have attracted less attention. Unless murder was not merely the cover-up. Unless murder was part of the experiment. Threshold's prospective testimony protocol appears to have tested whether a subject could be conditioned to confess, in precise detail, to a future event. Once the statement was fixed in memory, someone else could make the event match it. The confession would seem uncannily accurate because the crime scene had been built around the confession. And that brings you to Trial 17. The mechanic may have been the conditioned subject. The woman may have discovered the operation. The engineer may have recorded the script. But why did he speak the confession himself? Audio analysis described in later correspondence suggests the reel was assembled from multiple sessions. The deathbed voice had not simply confessed in 1974. He had read the scenario aloud as a control track, providing the exact language interrogators would implant into their subject. Years later, nearing death, he copied that control track and added his admission. That is why the tape sounded prophetic. It contained the crime before the crime because the crime was designed to fulfill it. The damaged vehicle door. The coat. The grave. Even the detail police believed only the killer could know. All of it existed first as words on a page. So here is the answer. A man confessed to a crime that had not happened yet because he was not predicting the future, and he was not confessing to murder. He was confessing to authorship. The tape appears to describe an experiment in which officials created a detailed confession, conditioned a vulnerable man to repeat it, then arranged a real crime around those implanted details. The perfect confession did not solve the murder. The murder validated the confession. And the mechanic's recantation, his insistence that police had planted the memories, may have been the most truthful statement he ever made. But there is a final problem. No original reel is publicly available today. The estate cleaner's copy reportedly passed to a journalist, then to an attorney, and finally disappeared. The surviving transcript cannot prove when the recording was made. The project documents are fragmentary. Names were removed. Dates conflict. That uncertainty is not a footnote. It is the line between history and legend. You cannot honestly say Threshold existed exactly as described. What you can say is that governments of that era conducted documented experiments on memory and coercion. Innocent people gave false confessions. Records vanished. Programs changed names. And somewhere inside that verified darkness, an old man recorded a sentence no one has explained away. The subject remembered the crime, before we committed it. Maybe the tape exposed a forgotten operation. Maybe it was an elaborate hoax built from real Cold War horrors. Either possibility should disturb you. Because the frightening part is not that someone predicted a murder. It is that institutions already knew how fragile memory could be, and how easily certainty could be manufactured. A confession feels like the end of an investigation. The voice knows the details. The speaker says, "I did it." The case closes. But if someone else applied the memory, then a confession may be only the beginning. The archive leaves you with no clean answer, only a dead prisoner, a missing woman, and 7 reels from a man who waited until his final days to explain what he had done. If this broke your brain a little, subscribe. We drop one of these every week. Because the next file begins with an aircraft touching down perfectly, its engines still running, its cabin undamaged. The plane landed with no one alive on board and no sign of struggle.